Brian Smith here, and welcome to the Dreampath podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. Dylan Neuwirth is on the show today. Dylan is a Seattle artist whose primary medium is neon, but he identifies as an artist who works with light, space, and interactive technologies. To get a sense of what he does outside of neon, check out his digital video storytelling, which can be seen on museum websites, including the Bellevue Arts Museum. Dylan is also the creative director of Western Neon and the executive director of the Western Neon School of Art. Similar to the path taken by Dan Friday, who was featured on episode 18, Dylan got his start in Seattle working for Dale Chihuly, but quickly found his groove in the world of neon, where he has become a unique, preeminent force in the Seattle arts community and throughout the country. The first word I would use to describe Dylan is cool. I'm talking like James Dean cool, or Fonzie cool, for those who are old enough to remember the Happy Days reference. To get a sense of how cool this guy is, check out his photos on the Dreampath website on his episode page. Dylan is not only a cool guy, he's also wicked smart and is driven and passionate about what he does. As you listen to him talk about his journey from childhood into the arts, you can't help but be drawn into his story and narrative and root for him. He's an artist who is all in the art world. Everything he does professionally seems to be motivated by a pure, organic, authentic interest in creating something unique and impactful. He currently has pieces in the Bellevue Arts Museum and has an installation outside the Museum of Museums on Capitol Hill in Seattle. He also has an installation in Wyoming and is currently working on a novel, so his creative interests seem to be branching outside of visual art. This interview took place at Western Neon in Seattle, in a conference room that I thought was going to be nice and quiet. But to my surprise, the sounds of the neon artists working in the shop reverberated into the room we were in. But I think it makes our talk even more interesting and kinetic. The background noise of the artists doing their thing kind of buzzes to the vibration of Dylan's narrative, and I think makes for a really special episode. So I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging discussion with Dylan Neuwirth. So Dylan Neuwirth, thank you for being on the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We're here at Western Neon in downtown Seattle, and we're here at this is a neon fabrication studio, and we're in a conference room, and I just got introduced to your crew back there that's doing some work, and thank you for having us.
Oh, of course, my pleasure.
Yeah. I had the real pleasure of seeing your work in person over the last couple of weeks, and last night I checked out all my friends at the Museum of Museums.
Yeah, Museum of Museums.
Yeah. So tell me how that project came about.
It's really interesting. My friend Greg Lundgren has been a culture shaper, artist, provocateur, just kind of an operator in art and music and culture and lifestyle in Seattle for as long as I've known him, which is about 20 years. He was, I would say, one of the first good friends I met in Seattle, when I moved here in 2001. It was on July 5th, and I was wearing a T-shirt that he had put out that said, "I heart art critics." And that was just one of Greg's things. And I walked by his old Vital 5 was the name of is the name of his kind of imprint, and he had a space at a car dealership that was like a 70s car dealership. It was amazing, where the Whole Foods is now at the corner of Westlake and Denny. And so I walked by there on July 5th, and he looks out the window, knocks on the window, and it's like points to the shirt, and I look at it, and he's like, come in, and we met, and so I've been hanging out with him and that crew of people. They're my first big kind of like art family in Seattle, at that point. And just throughout the years and the projects, just always stay connected. And so he hit me up and said, I was kind of actually taking 2019 off from doing projects. So it was kind of like I need a break. And 18 was like a huge year. And so, but he called me and said, "Hey, I have an interesting idea. I'm doing this thing, Museum of Museums." And so I went and I was like, "Yeah, it's very Greg." Went and checked it out. And he's like, here's what I want to do. And I want this, I want color here. I want this. And so, we just kind of collaborated and had some fun. And then this piece just kind of was always been in the back of my mind. I love when that happens. I always have ideas that seem to sort of keep percolating. And when it's the right time, it's the right time, and for me, I always, I draw a lot from, where I grew up in Athens, Georgia, is a big music town, right? That's like where REM is from. That's where like alternative music and indie rock kind of comes from.
Indigo Girls too?
In that area, in the area. It was just this really cool place and really magical and classical. It's called the Classic City, for instance.
Yeah.
My mom taught Michael Stipe in high school.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just kind of deep roots with that. So for me, I draw a lot from music, right? So I view a lot of what I do as kind of like, maybe I'm like kind of like wish I was a musician my whole life or something, but a lot of my work is kind of, I look at it like albums and singles and EPs and kind of B-sides and demos, that's kind of how I look at my stuff. And so what we started talking about in Mom, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be this could be an awesome single. Let's do it, and so I had the idea and we started, messing around with it and getting it like, this feels good. This idea of kind of train tracks, the light rail comes by there, or the trolley car, but train tracks and like circuitry and kind of course, Seattle and tech. But that idea of analog is like tracks, and then like the circuit board and kind of like technology coming together, and then like the subway system and like the idea of kind of lines merging together, and friendships that evolve over many years, and they break apart and come back together again. And so we started working on it, and everybody, in my team got together. My studio is I consider my studio a huge collaborative process. So it's always people coming in and coming out and projects, and we got behind it and started doing it, and then all these people started showing up by the woodwork. Like people I hadn't seen in 10 years started popping up at Museum of Museums, because Greg has that magnetism, right, where it starts pulling these people from all these places. And so people started showing up, and I was just like thinking about it. And usually my titles for stuff are really either cryptic or really kind of like they mean something to me, or they're like really like, source code or screens, or kind of ominous, right? But I was just like thinking about just people showing up. And then the LCD sound system song, all my friends started just that rhythm came on the radio. I was like, oh my God, totally, all my friends. And I was like, hey Greg, man, like, what do you think about all my friends? Is that like I hate titles and it's kind of annoying, but he's like, I love it. And I'm like, is it kind of corny? He's like, what is corny? I'm done with corny. It's just real.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how it came about. And
nice.
It's just cool that, like, really be honest, man, like I put a lot of thought into my work. It's really conceptual, to be honest. It's very surface and very, it has a certain, of course, it looks really poppy and it looks really like visually pleasing.
Yeah.
But there's so much conceptual stuff that goes into it that really nobody even sees. But to have something have just a real direct line from let's do this to here's the design to here it is to there it is, and have it be like have that impact on people it's had so far.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But it's interesting that you mentioned the digital analog intersection, because our friendships, if we're talking about all my friends, our friendships these days are an intersection of analog and digital, and mostly digital.
Sure.
Everything we do is texting, don't call me, face to face is so rare.
Yeah.
So I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's and that actually to me it resonates pretty heavily, because like a part of how I got, I've always been creative my whole life. I've always been an artist my whole life, but there's, a period there where it just wasn't active, or it certainly wasn't positive. It was when I've been sober since 2011, but during the years, like the black hole years, and it's a good sort of circle back on Craig and our relationship. But like, anyway, like that period of time, like I just, at the end of that black hole period, because I moved to Seattle, and it was like meeting all these people and doing all these things and projects and opportunities and what you want when you move somewhere and things are getting kind of exciting. But then I just pretty much wrecked it all, and at the very end, it was like this black hole, and I didn't have anything, So when I got sober and was kind of rebuilding everything, I literally had to like lean on, because social media was just coming out, that's when like Facebook and like Instagram started popping up in like 2011, 12. It was like, this is web 2.0, right? You know, so for me, I kind of like rebuilt myself back up in a digital sense, like reaching out to people through the internet and kind of being like, was considered this like, you know, someone told me, a friend in New York, like, we always thought of you like an internet artist, but that made physical stuff. Your medium kind of like references this like digital sense, but it's really physical, but you're kind of, your themes are about this disconnection in what we see in analog and digital life and that divide, right?
Yeah.
You know, so that is, to me, that was kind of probably subconsciously put into that piece for sure.
Yeah. So when did you come up from Athens?
You know, I moved here in 2000, like winter of 2000. So 2001, I got here right before it turned into the new year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's when the drugs started and...
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh,
okay.
No. Yeah. I mean, Athens, first of all, I'm lucky to have made it out of Athens because it's like a very comfortable black hole, you know? I mean, it's a college town. It's like, you know, it's just this like magical place in the South where this confluence of the university, the people, the place, you know, it's just kind of got this uniquely Southern thing happening, but it's also kind of super progressive because of the university and international feeling because it's a huge research university. So it was just, you know, I mean, I was going to, you know, we were going to like, you know, house shows and house parties, like, you know, college bands playing when we were like 15 and just like getting out and, you know, living a crazy life. And so, yeah, I mean, it started back then. I mean, that's kind of where I got like the idea, you know, where we sort of fell into how I lived most of my whole life, you know, and still kind of do, just without, you know, drugs and alcohol, you know, but like partying, man, like I just love to party, you know, and just like get out and live life and do stuff. So, you know, it started there and that's when I got to Seattle. It was part of just being an artist, man, you know, it always has been, right? Yeah. That's just what it is, you know, but it took me a long time to kind of like understand that, you know, there's this identity that you're trying to create with that. Right. And that's just a false case, you know, and that authenticity is the most powerful and flexible medium that there is. Right. So for a long period of time there, you know, I mean, I was using powers of creativity in a negative sense and in a very, you know, cruel way. Right. Like it was like a desire, like an ego, like, you know, hunger and ambition. But those can be twisted in very negative ways.
Ulterior motives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that was the turn when, you know, I did get sober and it took me a while, you know, it's not like instantaneous, like, oh yeah, I get it now, you know, like year 3, it kind of clicked.
Right.
Like, I see what's going on here, you know? And so that kind of, you know, and it's every day, right? It ebbs and flows, but it's something now like in almost year 9 coming up, almost a decade. It's, you know, it was, of course, obviously the right choice, and it's led to so many awesome things. So,
how do you feel your art changed after becoming clean and sober?
You know, I think the most powerful thing about it was that it started to actually be about, I say about something, and that's kind of weird because I was always considered like, you know, my friends, like I was always the research artist, like it's conceptual, like it's always about getting to referencing something that is behind the curtain in what you're seeing physically, or the thing that you're seeing is a result of a process, or it's kind of like a what I would call a residue from something, you know, either an experience, and this object is kind of like this lived object, or it has this kind of other meaning. And it was always, you know, I'm a reader. Like I just devour research and read and take things in and soak things up. And but when I got, you know, sober, it was when the work became more personal. I realized that I had this like huge cavern of radioactivity in me, because, you know, it wasn't like I just woke up and said, hey, let's party. I mean, it's kind of how I grew up too, which is heavily linked to how I got into the medium of working with illuminated like neon, right? I mean, that comes from how I grew up. I mean, I had this, and I've told the story a million times, but it never is not resonating, right? Is that, you know, in my kitchen where I grew up, you know, my mom, she, you know, her second husband and that had started dissolving, and our dad wasn't in the mix. And so we had, you know, my brother and my sister and my mom would live in this house, and it's like way out in the woods and stuff. And there was, in the kitchen though, her second husband had given her a neon sign that said her name, Judy, but it said Judy's, like it's her place, but kind of like a bar.
Yeah.
You know? And that was in our kitchen. And then there was also a black and white TV in the corner, and then under the sink in this cabinet, lit with like fluorescent lights, was where she kept the bourbon, right? So, at night she'd get home, and she was an English professor, and she worked in, continuing education. She's brilliant, and, she had the Trashy Book Club, this kind of proto-feminist kind of book club, and all these like university women got together and drink wine, talk about John Opdyke and, stuff like that. So it was
that's cool.
Cool household, right? But at night, she was definitely, had a drinking problem. And so she would, do all the stuff and the responsibilities, but then she would, invariably, pass out, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be up late at night and had that, black and white TV. I turned on that sign because the transformer was under the stove, on this side of the kitchen. Turn that sign on, which is like this red glow. And you have the TV with like this, the black and white, watching like Blade Runner for the first time, which is not a black and white movie, Terminator, RoboCop, like all this late night
futuristic stuff,
totally, which is in sci-fi. So I'm just like able to escape into this world, and then the light under the stove or the cab to the sink, with the bourbon, right? So it's kind of like this environment, and so it took me like getting sober and just kind of like diving in like I had something to prove, which I probably did. It was kind of like I'm proving I'm alive. I'm proving I'm like have wasted all this decade of time, in this black hole. I've got something to say. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to keep saying it. And that, I'm not a piece of shit. And like, also like, hey, I'm sorry to all these people. Like, I think I've like let you all down in some way, and I've let myself down. Right. Yeah. But it took a while to really understand. I just was really recreating that room. Every single thing I did was kind of like this installation about something I was feeling impulsively inside to communicate. A very focal point neon piece and other kind of props, if you will, things. And it just took me a long time to go, oh, wow, that's that room. Yeah. Really, I think, and it led to a really powerful body of work in 2017, 18. That was a part of the stuff I mentioned in 18 was kind of this big banner year. And it was just kind of like, man, I need a break from this stuff.
And that's the stuff you find, that's the work that you find at Bellevue Arts Museum.
That was a part of it. Yeah, that was a part of it. And then what you didn't see there was this show called, the audio work called Metanoia. And that was created with like a huge collaboration with myself and my mom and my sister and a VR artist named Grant Kirkpatrick and an audio artist named Fritz Rodriguez and Jason Christian, who's a glassblower, Cold Cube Press, who would make like risograph materials. So we printed a graphic novel. There was, the Danny Case, Will Kirtley on the neon side of things. There was Tony and Ruth Lockwood at Oxbow. There was, this is like a list of people that goes on and on to kind of get that body of work to happen. And what that was like a virtual reality recreation of that kitchen as a space. Right. And then there was a comic book about all these things in my journals and being like, we found journals when I was like 8 years old. And we found these journals and drawings and like put all that stuff, plus when I was a teenager and like an early years in Seattle, into like a comic book, Metanoia. So then it was like audio recordings of like the noble gases, neon and krypton and xenon and helium and argon, sampled out of tubes, and we like put those through like, contact mics to see what those gases sounded like and made techno tracks out of them. And like, and there was a performance, and it was kind of like a ritual of going, like telling my story. Cause like in self-help meetings, you compelled to tell your story at like a speaker's meeting. Yeah. But I have since getting out all the legal stuff, which was a steep amount of things. I've done a fair amount of legal stuff, in my life and some jail time and some stuff like that. So, but once I got out of the requirements of going to AA, I have not attended AA regularly. That's just not been my program. Working through my stuff visually and artistically became my program. Yeah. And understanding what the power of now and being present and authenticity and honesty, has been my personal program. I don't advocate that for everybody. Anybody's path is their path. Yeah. Path is not your path or the best path. It's just been my path. But that was a telling of the story. And in the middle of that, I entered into the virtual reality room for the first time, and we projected it on the wall so that people in the room saw what I saw for the first time going back to this place that was like so formative. So it's like PTSD encounter. Yeah. And
it's quite a vivid description of, when I was watching a video last night that you had put together, something to do with Flash. There's a 4-minute video where you are
Oh, that character.
You're talking as a computer character.
Right.
And you go into the bourbon under the sink very briefly and the neon sign, but it's just, I mean, you're talking about that for a matter of seconds,
right?
But you still paint this extremely vivid image of what you were seeing as a child and how it has influenced you to this day.
100%.
In your art. Yeah. And it actually, I was watching it. It was like a 4-minute video. And at the end, I was like almost crying. I was like, wow, that's intense how you can take because you weren't even talking as your voice was
heavily modulated.
Yeah. And I'm like, how does that happen?
But anyway, great. Well, cool. Yeah. I'm glad that worked.
Yeah, no, it was
no, that's
really...
my favorite thing I've ever made, to be honest with you. That video, that one video, that, New Folklore, that video itself.
Yeah.
That by far, but definitely I guess now all my friends takes that cake, but that one, yeah, I love that piece and I've been told that's like the one. I'm like, I know, it's awesome because it just, it combines everything. It's like it's like a story. It's also kind of entertaining. It's kind of weird. It's kind of unsettling. It's like the digital is there enough to like that character. It's kind of futuristic. Like what? And it just has all that stuff put together.
And I like pieces that do something very efficiently, because I think our attention spans have really suffered over the years. So
I agree.
Nobody's reading books anymore.
Right.
We're barely watching movies anymore. It's now like 30-minute episodes of television, if that.
Right.
But in terms of artistically, if you can pack something into like a 4-minute story that is so visual and, just gives you this paints this picture that takes you somewhere, into
absolutely.
someone's emotions. That's great. How did you prepare to be an artist in terms of education or workshops, or, is it all self-taught? What was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny. We just revisited this with my son. He's 15 and he is an excellent drawer, and he draws, he sculpts, he's getting into it. He's just pretty much resisted a lot of what I've either tried to show him for drawing when we're drawing, which I think is awesome. He's just doing his own thing. And he's incredible. He's talking about going to on to take AP class in high school and get the credits. And I was like, that's funny, because let's go back and look at my AP class submission. Because the teacher was like, dude, you're going to get a 5 or a 1. Right, you're going to get the best or the worst score. That's all that's going to happen here. And I got the worst score, And so it's like, I grew up heavily encouraged to be creative, and was always making art, and that was always a thing. And my grandmother who helped raise us, she was always just like, yeah, this is your thing. Like let's see whatever you need. And I was in theater, and so I was always being creative, and it was always, that was always happening, always drawing, always doing stuff. But I'd be like, at 13 years old, down in the basement, getting like a half full balloon that was attached to like a stick and a rock and like a can, and making some weird thing. And I was always just like doing stuff and looking at books and like taking that in. And we'd always go to museums. We go to DC and New York, and it's always like being educated about what this is. There is this thing called an art world.
Yeah, that's a unique childhood.
Oh yeah, it was heavily this like always available, right? Yeah. So it was just like always happening, taking classes here and there. But I would either always, I'd get kicked out of every class, or they would just be like, he does not. Yeah, But my mom actually took me to. So she had, when I was like a really young child, she took me to get tested because I wasn't doing well in school. And they're like, let's get him tested. Like, let's see what's going on. And they came up to kind of a creative problem-solving aptitude test, and I was just like, I'm not taking it. And they're like, well, that's the most creative response. Hard to handle, but the most creative response.
Yeah.
So I did well enough in school, going all the way up, and art throughout high school. Got that 1 on that AP test, but ended up going to UGA because I only applied to one school. I'm going to go to UGA. My mom taught there, and so I was probably going to get in. I got in, and
what's UGA?
University of Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the huge state school, awesome art program. We actually Lamar Dodd School of Art. We'd actually met Lamar Dodd. We met Jack Davis, who drew for Mad Magazine. Gave me a drawing. We always had this around, and. So I was super lucky for that. But then when I got in, I fell into the sculpture program. Well, actually, that's not true. I got into the first art classes, and because I did not get out of taking those classes, I had to take the basic art classes. I ended up dropping out of school for like a year. I ended up living in like Colorado and Boston and Oregon and Colorado, and I actually broke all the ribs on the right side of my body at the end of the last day of the snowboarding season. It was the last day. I was like, hey man, watch this, and I was just ripping this killer jump and boom, just totally bit it. And so in recovery from that, I was like, what am I doing? I got to go back and like finish this, So went back, fell into sculpture, and that was it. When I fell into sculpture, I met these people. Those are my people. And we were just lucky that we had all these processes, man. Like, it was like we had a foundry, we had a 3D printer, 1999. We had all this cool technology and stuff. So I kind of fell into understanding that there was a way to make money by skills, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to weld, learning how to do all these things to support being creative, because it's so difficult to be supported when you're creative if you don't want to depend on other people.
Yeah.
I don't like to depend on other people like that.
And if you're a sculptor, those are good crossover skills to have.
100%.
Yeah.
It was like I was like a painter. Like, what's up? Really? Like, no, man. Like, let's go make money.
Right.
Like let's work. And that's when I first started messing. That's when neon came back into my life, because I knew people who did that. We didn't have that. I think I was even offered a guy's like, hey, come out and learn it. But I was always working. I never had a chance to, like, I had to work at a restaurant. I mean, I worked at the Grit, which was a building that Michael Stipe owned that building. So it was always around there too. So we all partied in that scene with like Michael Stipe when they were in town, and Neutral Milk Hotel, and all these awesome bands that were at that point in time.
Oh, that's incredible.
Plus I worked at the 40 Watt. So, I saw like everybody who came through there before there was this internet thing happening. There was like, the Pixies and Sonic Youth, and like Nirvana was coming around there, and Beck and Flaming Lips and Guided by Voices. And I mean, the list goes on and on, but I worked at the club right there at like 97, 8, and 9.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was just like, that was the time.
Yeah.
So that was cool too.
That's fantastic. So how important was formal education, university education, to your formation as an artist? And the reason I ask that question is that I'm sure some listeners are wondering if they're in their, just graduated from high school and they want to go in that direction, but it's expensive. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Tell us about how important that experience was.
Looking back, I would say this. It took me a while to realize that the most powerful experiences for me as an artist have only ever been through who I met and how I met them and what happened after we met or didn't happen. That sounds kind of nebulous, but what it really means is that by knowing a person, like for instance, like Greg, for all those years, and that's 20 years later that we made the coolest thing we ever made together, right? Did it take 20 years for us to get where we needed to be in life to kind of like know that we're like pretty okay at certain things and can like quickly pull a trigger and make something cool? Maybe. But like knowing, having that relationship where he just saw me in a t-shirt and then it led to all this, that's cool. So at UGA, really it was more important about meeting friends that happened, right? Like I met a guy in the sculpture program, David, and his wife Ashley came as a graduate student. They ended up getting married. They moved to University of Wyoming. She's a sculpture professor now. She's the head of the whole department. She's a tenured professor. They named their son Dylan, Elijah Dylan. They commissioned me to make a huge sculpture at the University of Wyoming Art Building. We actually ended up getting my wife and I married in front of that before we shipped it out there. I mean, the fabric of these experiences came from that.
Those relationships.
Yeah. As far as formal education, and I met some other professors there that I really valued highly, but as far as like, hey, this class was perfect or this experience was perfect, I just don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I think that whatever path feels right, where you're meeting the right people, is the most important path.
Yeah. So if you can find a community, then
100%.
Yeah, an
100%.
art community that's in your, whatever your vibe is.
Yeah,
then that can be just as helpful as a university experience.
Absolutely. And if you feel compelled to go back for a graduate degree and pay all that money for that and do that because you feel like you need to meet more people, that's cool. Go ahead and do that. But for me personally, like I'm not in that kind of debt. I'm happy I'm not, because I was able to take that and spend that money to make huge pieces and invest in that, and invest in like also what I also believe in is that what I never found cool was that, growing in Athens, right, it's the South. There's people who have advantages to things and people who don't by virtue of where they come up from.
Yeah.
Right. So being in a college class and looking out and seeing a guy I went to high school with out working in the facilities, that's fucked up. why would I have a chance to go to college and this person would, that's their opportunity is to only work in facilities, and maybe that's their choice in life, right? But you get exposed to seeing that education is this privilege, obviously, and not everybody has access to that.
Yeah.
But what we do have access to is being in certain places where you can choose to provide for yourself if you can, right? And working hard, being focused on something, and like that to me is more valuable. So for my work, I've always sought to find ways to like create situations where I can get people paid and pay other artists and like, hey man, like I will pay you to do this. Like you're better at it than I ever was. Like you do that part. I'm going to do this part, or let's get some money and like, let's go to a blue collar shop that usually does this and give them this weird project. Like check this out, and like, I feel like I'm helping create work, for people too. So, did college teach me that? Maybe in an inverse way, but it didn't teach me how to be like a project manager. It didn't teach me how to be smart about dealing with certain business things. It didn't teach me any of that stuff. I was able to meet people and mess with some really weird shit I would never have access to. And if that's worth it for somebody, that's awesome. But they find another community that does that for them in a different way, it's more supportive. 100%.
Well, it sounds like also, I mean, as I talk to more artists and understand their journeys, it seems like luck has something to do with it.
Sure.
Because, growing up in a town like Athens, totally random that you're born into this family that is living in Athens, which sounds like a fantastic city. I've never been there. But the way you describe it and what I know about it, it's kind of a cultural mecca in Georgia. And I kind of look at it like Asheville, North Carolina.
Or Austin, Texas.
You have these progressive cities, very art-friendly, musician-friendly cities that are in the middle of areas that aren't so progressive.
Right.
But, how great is that to grow up in an area like that? And also have a mom who is thinking about art and supporting you in that direction that you want to go.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So when did you go from sculpture, you say you fell into sculpture, but when did you find neon as your medium?
I mean, I fell into sculpture there, like I said, because it was kind of like, I've always loved to work. It was very blue collar. It was just like, let's make things, let's do things, right? It's, that was always, I think, what sucked me into it. I think, and there was a collaboration there with Nick Holt's cousin, Rafe. Rafe Holt was a neon maker, and Nick was kind of like his mother was in the Trashy Book Club with my mom, and so we always grew up looking up to Nick when we were younger. Like he had the Pink Floyd posters in the room, and then we always heard, oh, he fell into some trouble, he's at rehab, and he's at this weird alternative school, whatever, right? But we came back to be friends in the older years. So he had this film festival, and he commissioned me to make this huge sort of sculpture for the Eyeball Film Festival. So you should incorporate neon, that'd be cool. Like Rafe can do it. And so again, I didn't have the chance to go out to make the neon with him because I had to work. I was a line cook as well during, I'm cooking and at the grit and this kind of thing. So he produced the neon, he had the object, and I was like, cool. And we integrated it, and it was awesome. And I was like, man, that's cool. So, when I moved to Seattle, I got a job at this place called Earthwise, which is kind of like a building reclamation service, and they sell, like old doors and windows and stuff. But it was across the street from the, we're in Western Neon right now on 4th Avenue South. But for a long time, Western Neon was over at First and Lander, and Earthwise was across the street, So I had an opportunity to do a show in Tacoma, right? My first show kind of in the region. And I had just had this tattoo before I came back from Athens that said, resist trademark on my wrist. My left wrist, and I was like, I want to make that neon. That's awesome. Oh, look, cool, Western Neon. So I walk in there, I'm like, hey, can you guys make this? And I just did a Sharpie marker. Like I still have a Sharpie marker on me. I'm always doing that. And they're like, yeah, that's cool, great, and that's all we need. And I'm like, awesome. I'm like, what colors? I'm like, well, the tattoo's orange and blue. We worked it out, and I was like, cool. And for me, I'm like I said, like super kind of on this. The way I've always approached things is I'm always making ideas, and I'm drawing and doing things. Looking at books, and Fresh Cream had just come out. It was this fight-on book, Fresh Cream, and it was just kind of like 10 curators picked 10 artists, and that's what the book's about. It's like these first sort of like wave of international surveys. This is kind of before the internet being effective at that. So I'm just sort of seeing how artists are working all over the world, and I'm just kind of identifying with things and going like, yeah, that's me. Okay, that's me. Like I see that, right? Artists who are working just all these different mediums, you know? And so that first show was like this neon sign. It was me performing with an amplifier and a microphone and like freestyle rapping to a boombox. There was this huge installation that came out of a briefcase. I'm like obsessed with cases and like magic kits and Wunderkammers and these kind of things wrapped up in boxes and full of all this debris and residue and junk, you know, about my life right now, right? And so that was the first one. But if you look back at the kitchen, right, it's the same shit.
That was like the first one.
Yeah, it's a neon sign.
Yeah, right.
It's, or you know, a neon sculpture, a thing, and something kind of media. That way, it was audio, boombox. We had this, you know, always playing college radio, you know, in the radio, you know, in the kitchen, and the stuff of life that was like in that room.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I fell in, and Western Neon was kind of like the one, you know, and made a couple things after that. Like my first diamond piece was there, and then, you know, when I came out of the black hole, that was one of the first places I went back into, where I met Andre Lucero, who's the current owner, you know, an old friend of mine.
Owner of Western Neon?
Yeah. And so I first met him. So I went in there and I was like, hey, you know, and he remembers the day too. He's like, you know, who's this dickhead? He's like, yeah, and I came in there all hot, you know, like, so I want this, it has to be like this, and it has to be this color, it has to be this, you know, had it all like designed out, and it said Total War, and he's like, Total War? Like, well, what's that? And I'm like, well, it's just, you know, that's it, man. You know, and he's like, you mean that's it? I go, that's it. And he's like, okay, you know, but you know, for me, it meant like, I'm a big fan of William S. Burroughs, and it was just kind of like, we live on a war planet. Like, this planet could be anything, but it's a war planet. People are at war for everything. Yeah. You know, and it also meant for me, like, sobriety. Like, this is total war for me. This is like, no, you know, I'm doing this thing, right? Whatever that is. So I fell back in, and I just kind of kept going back. And we had this relationship and kept making stuff, and, you know.
As you may have noticed, there are great resources and advice mentioned in all our episodes. And for many of them, we actually collect all of these resources for you in one easy place, our newsletter. You can go to dreampathpod.com/newsletter to join. It's not fancy, just an email about each week's episode, featured artists, and resources to help you on your journey. Thanks. And now back to the interview. How'd you connect with Dale Chihuly?
I actually answered a Craigslist ad. To be a studio assistant.
Wow.
Yeah, back in the day. And that would be like 2006.
Okay, so this is still in the black hole era then.
It is, yeah. I was like I was just random jobs, and I just kind of like applied for this job, and then it was a Craigslist ad, and it took me like 3 months of interviews and things to get into the job.
Yeah.
You know?
Were you applying as an artist or as a technician, or, you know, like what?
You just applied as a studio assistant.
Okay.
That was the job posting, studio assistant, you know, which is how everybody who got into the area I worked in would answer an ad like that.
Did you know how big of a deal that was when you applied?
Well, it also was anonymous. You know, it was like International Art Studio looking for studio assistant.
Oh,
and
okay.
I'm thinking, well, that's either Gary Hill, the video artist who's well known here, or that's Dale Chihuly.
Oh, okay.
That's it, right?
One of the two.
In this area, that's probably, or Roy McMakin at that point in time. I was like, that's it, you know, and that I could think of. And so, yeah, I had no idea, and I ended up going to this address, and it's like a super anonymous location, and, you know, got in, and I was like, got it, you know. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's another one of those things that I fell into, right? I mean, not fell into, but like was just the relationships that I formed in that life that I spent, my portion of my life I spent there, super formative, super amazing, to be able to go through the changes I went through there, to be able to come sober and still get a chance to go back to work there, to be asked to come back. You know, I mean, that was just epic, you know, and working with, you know, not only Dale, but the art director there, Parks Anderson, and then director of the exhibitions, Tom Lind. And
what did you learn from Dale Chihuly? That experience?
I would just say the most powerful thing I learned there was just kind of, you know, how to be an artist at any level. The doing of being an artist is the doing of being an artist. And that's kind of a cryptic thing, but I think for me it just means it doesn't matter what it is, but you have to do it, and you have to do a lot of it, and you have to do it all the time. You know, and you have to then look back and see what you've done to go, okay, let's either do more of that, or let's just move forward, let's do that. But you have to, it's just like tentacle spreading as far as you can, because, you know, let's face it, life's short. So
execution.
execution,
yeah.
right? And in that time frame that it's just kind of like go, do,
yeah.
and then look back, right? Don't try to get it perfect. Just, and I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So it's kind of...
And done is better than perfect.
I've come to learn that. Yeah, I've come to accept that, for sure. So that's a big one. And also that it's total. The word total makes a lot of sense because all those environments, like all the buildings that we worked in and all the stuff that, Dale's created, is that he's always created something total. It's from the, if it's an exhibition, it's the thing that it's not just the glass. It is the glass, right? But that is just like one aspect of what this man has done or that artist has done throughout their whole life. We're talking video when people weren't really doing that. He's taken a medium of glass. That's the thing. Taken it in so many different directions and done so many different things with it. And then the people he's brought in, right? All the people I met there through relationships that were brought into the magnetism of working on something bigger than themselves. And,
right.
And that was always so cool.
And some of those people, Wilbur, right? Wilbur,
of course.
Yeah. And Dan Friday, just really fun, creative people who are in it for all the right reasons, it seems like. That
as well as, I think what's really cool is that the ability there, or the experiences there, of working with really powerful women who work in creativity. And I think I will always respect that. Like Renee Devine and Ashley Long, two that stick out to me, are people who are, on the project management side of things, project coordination. But like having that experience to where as the arts is so tilted towards, people like me, white males, right? To have that experience, to have grown up with powerful women in my life, like my mom, my grandmother, and all the women in my mom's, trashy book club and that whole world. This is like the, 80s and 90s. We weren't raised by men. They weren't around. It was divorces. It was that whole thing. Yeah. We were raised by women. So have that experience to work with women in that capacity was always rewarding to me and cool, because it was like, I'm used to this. This is cool, you know? And so that was cool to have that. And I have, still keep in touch with Renee and Ashley now that I'm not there, and they've moved on to other chapters in life too. So it's just cool to have had that happen too.
Do you find that women are fairly represented in terms of the type of work that you do? Do you see women doing neon art and working with their hands, and what involves, a lot of welding and heat and, in sort of an industrial environment? You would think that would be an environment where you wouldn't see a lot of women, but are you seeing something differently?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's awesome, especially, it's really cool now that we're seeing a huge push to de-bro the art world. That's awesome. And to allow voices into the art world that were never there.
I like that de-bro.
De-bro this thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And to also have it where these voices are coming in that just were never there, right? And or never had a chance to have that voice be heard. That's awesome. I fully support that. Like I get so tired of looking at me out there, and it's not interesting. It's flat out, and I want to hear other voices and other stories. I have no idea what they are, where they came from, and that's cool. And in the neon, it's been totally refreshing that I think that's happening a lot quicker in that medium than I think other mediums. Like we, for instance, our school that we have, so 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 people involved in our staff, and 2 are women who are young women who are really adept at what they do and are teaching us things from where they're coming from, which is great. And then a lot of our students are women, and they are awesome at it, at the medium. I'm finding, which is so great. And I mean, like, I'm finding like I doubted that. It's just like, oh my God, this is so cool that like, wow, they're like crushing it, it's so cool to see that. And also She Bends popped up, which is an all-woman neon art kind of like, now I would say a movement on some level, because they've had shows. I think that they're coming up on their 3rd or 4th iteration of that, and it's just about women in the field working in it.
And bending is referring to the actual bending of the glass, right? Yeah,
because you have this thing in neon where it's this, people who are benders and people who are not. And that is something that a lot of the thing is focused on, because, and it's definitely relevant. I mean, because people are used to having it be where neon, just like, oh, I'm going to go have this made for me. I'm going to go have this made, right? And so it's kind of this idea of people working with their hands. You see it in neon now. You see it in ceramics. You see it in not so much fabrication yet, but you will. It'll definitely happen. You see it in the fact that, hey, it's actually the maker of these things, the person who's doing the work is as important or more important than quote unquote the artist. And I think that in some instances that can be true. It's just awesome to see that it's another voice popping up that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
That's good, because it's making it known that, hey, there's a person who bends, this is made by hand. You know, this is how this is done, right? And I think that She Bends has made a huge presence with that. It's super, super cool and important to see. The diversity of artists in that group is killer. We've had visiting artists at the school that we started, and I think we've had Lisa Schulte, who's based in LA. She's an amazing mentor to me. She's a woman, identifies as a woman. She's an artist. She runs a business that has been long-standing since like the 80s. She does it all, and so that's cool to know that she's been in it for so long and is still so humble about it and just smart and cool and doing her thing. And it's just like, when I met her in person, we just became friends because we just kind of clicked up, and so that's been cool.
So you are the creative director of the school here?
I'm the creative director at Western Neon, and then the executive director of the school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So two separate hats that you wear.
Two separate hats there, and then as artist, and that's another hat, and then dad, and husband.
Yeah. So tell us about the school and how that somebody who might be interested in applying, how they would get into the school.
Sure. We started the school in the winter of 2018. That was our first class of 8 students. An intro class. And so Western Neon School of Art was built on this idea that, kind of goes a little further back. We have Western Neon was started by Jay and Michael Blazik in 85. And it was started as a gallery, Western Neon, a place to show light art. And it became a business because their father, Dean Blazik, was like this pioneer in neon in the 50s. And he worked at Everbright Signs, and he ended up writing these books called the Neon ABCs. And it was like, now become like a Bender's Bible.
Yeah.
To how to work in the medium. And then he started a school, the Northern Wisconsin School of Neon in Antigo, Wisconsin. And so people, answered an ad in the back of a magazine and like went to this school in the middle of nowhere and paid like $3,000 and took these classes. And so the sons grew up in this atmosphere, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. And, so they moved to Seattle and start this business, or this gallery that became a business. Here we are today. Let's look back and start our own school to kind of reference the past and bring it, full circle. And so we started the school with that kind of experimental idea, and let's do this class. And at this point in time, now we have like 3, fall, winter, spring quarters, 2 intro classes, and an intermediate. So we have 24 students enrolled during a class time, and we have a waiting list of like 500 people.
Oh my goodness.
We do workshops and stuff. So the best way is to get on our waiting list, and when we post those classes, pay attention to that email.
Yeah.
If you want to come, sign up, because it goes fast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us about the business of being a neon artist and what the challenges are for you and have been over the last decade to get paid and to make a living.
Yeah, to do it. Well, I'll tell you, it's a super challenging medium because number one, it's expensive. It is an expensive medium. It's not something where you just go down to, whatever medium you work in, you don't just go down and get some supplies and start like making this big thing, right? And then it's a lot of front costs. And what I mean by that is that it's taken a long period of time for the medium of neon to be accepted as its own individual artistic medium. It's always say, oh, I love that sign. It's like, it's not a sign, dude, it's a sculpture. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And anybody in it will tell you that. And also sort of like that kind of idea of, are you involved in neon so you fabricate stuff for other people? Or do you fabricate it, or are you making only for yourself? Or are you doing both because you have to pay bills? And people in the middle who do both, it can be a challenge to sort of step out and stand out as an artist who works in that medium, as opposed to a fabricator who sometimes has art somewhere, and that kind of mix, right? So there's a challenge there. So I think that and for me, I don't identify as a bender. I'm not the person in the fire making the tubes in the fire.
Yeah.
I have made my tubes in the fire. Significantly, I made Judy's, the sign from, my childhood, because that made sense for me to make that.
Yeah.
I needed to sort of encounter the medium that way. And that's kind of how I've been. It's weird. I've been definitely identified as an artist who works in light, space, and interactive technologies. That's how I identify. but I kind of get into whatever medium I'm working in, super hands-on, if that makes sense. Like I only work with anything if it makes sense. Like, and that could be anything, like making a digital animation about my childhood with this weird, puppet that has a weird voice. Like got way into that and made that and figured that out. But then I kind of, move on to the next episode, like what's engaging, right? And so like telling story, it's kind of like, I'm most interested in music and film. That's where I really, in literature. But those are all things that kind of, to me, come from kind of being like, I'd like to direct a movie, or I'd like to write and record and produce the album and do the artwork for the album and put it all together and like the whole package, So for me, it's like taking bits and parts and pieces of things and putting them together to tell a story. I love doing that. That's cool. I get engaged by that. So to be a neon artist or to have sort of like, the reason I kept falling back into the medium was obviously like this intrinsic story I needed to tell. Yeah. I needed to keep going back to this room psychologically. And so I kept working with the medium, not really, it's because of relationships too. It's people I was working with, and I liked working with Andre and Western Neon. It was a cool relationship. I kept learning things. I kept knowing more about, like something kept guiding me back. Like, I need to know more. I need to know more. I need to know more. And like, it's esoteric, man. It's like, these are gases that literally come from space and they illuminate. And it's like, whoa. And then I started finding other connections. Like what kept me engaged with it was like the idea of what we talked about in the beginning, the digital and the analog. I mean, check this out. This is kind of wild. I mean, these gases are elements. That's analog, right? Like neon, right? Which means new one, right? It's this gas that if you trap it in a vacuum and you put electrical charge to those particles, it glows red. That's what it does. That's its nature, property. Yeah. But it's what's inside of silicon, which is glass, right? That's an element. But that element is also what we make microchips from. Okay. So if you look at the first computers, they were really vacuum tubes that stored an electron on either side. That's the first hard drive, right? But that was made possible because there was a glass tube there that had a vacuum inside of it. An electron could line up on either side. Yeah. So the first way we looked at a screen lit up was through a cathode tube. That was a glass tube that illuminated a glass display to show data. Right. So this idea that you had a noble gas, a space gas, trapped in a tube that was discovered in 1898 by a tabletop experiment by firing particles in an electron, at a plate, right? Which is, really like the beginning of the particle accelerator, which is wild to me. But they're firing these particles at a plate and seeing this divergence of these electrons, Morris Travers and William Ramsey, and they discover these things. Neon, new one. This is a new thing. Yeah. Right. That sort of idea led to what I consider the digital. It's the idea of taking something that is so primordial of this gas in a tube. It's electrified. That lets me store data. Now I can see data. I use those same things to make microchips because we make microchips in an argon atmosphere because it purges oxygen, which can corrupt environments. That's why we use it in welding. It makes welding possible because it creates an argon atmosphere around where the welding is actually occurring molecularly, right? Yep. Those are all related in some way. So for me to know that like there's this experience with the esoteric, which is the universe and time and space, and it gets captured in this material to be able to like the confluence of events to light up gas in a glass tube that led to the confluence of events to look at an object, which is a glass screen you swipe with your finger. That's a silicon. I'm looking at data behind that. It's made possible in an argon atmosphere to create that chip. Like the physical infrastructure for the digital, knowing that that's all related in that way, that keeps me coming back to neon. Why neon? Why do that? Right. So yeah, to answer your question now after all that, those are big questions and they're expensive to research. Yeah. But I feel like I spent the last 10 years of my first 10 years of sobriety researching all that and keeping to work with the medium. So I kept fronting the money to do all those things to be able to show people that, to say, check this out. This means something. It means something to me, and I think it means something to you. It's a big thing. Like, check this out. Did I get that idea across? Maybe, maybe not. But in the end, it led me to metanoia, which eventually led me to say, I think I'm done here. I mean, I've reached the end of my journey with this. Like, I got back to the bottom. This is the bottom of the well. This is everything that was down there. So to now be in the position where I'm really very interested, and along the way I had public art opportunities that popped up, great ones, but the thing with neon is that, and now I firmly believe this, to efficiently answer your question at the end of all that,
Okay.
The business of being a neon artist means that if you have big ideas in a medium, any medium, but with neon, you will for sure be invariably involved in fronting the money for a shop, like a glassblower would be. I've got to have a glassblowing shop. I've got to get all the stuff together. Wilbur will tell you that. Anybody will tell you that.
Yeah.
Neon shop, it's expensive, right? Mm-hmm. So but it's kind of cool because you end up working in a field that has a purpose. It's art that works. It is a sign. It's art that works, right?
Yeah.
So if you're involved in neon in any way, you probably have a little pigeonhole right there in the medium in somewhere, whether you're the glass bender, the assembler, the person who's the project manager, getting these things to get out in the world and happen. You're in the architecture, engineering side of it. You're in the metal fabrication side of it. You're in the painting side of it. You're in all those things it requires to make like a sign work, right?
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful place to be involved if you're into sculpture or objects, and you can kind of pay to support that habit of working in this medium,
Yeah.
And now at the end of all that, I find myself in a position of kind of like convincing public art decision-making boards that that's like one of my next social media posts is like, hey, look at all these pieces of public art I have fronted the money for, or have convinced people to front money for, to put out in the world, that have resisted the elements and have done very well. Because it's always what I hear. It's like, yeah, it's the neon stuff. It's it's cost prohibitive. It's expensive. It's not going to last. We've got to. It's not like a bronze sculpture or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at this point in time, I'm currently looking for opportunities I think are good fits for somebody else understanding the impact of not just what I've done, but what we've all done in this medium to make it impactful, last a long time, efficient, all those things that we know it is, to then just be accepted like this is a great opportunity for public art where the artist is not fronting the money and not doing all that stuff.
So with the Bellevue Arts Museum, you have the piece in the lobby.
Yep.
Yeah, you have the sign up top.
It's not a sign, man.
I'm sorry. The
The sculpture.
the sculpture up top.
All good.
My bad.
It's all good.
And then they also pointed out a bike frame.
Oh yeah, the bike frame.
Yeah. So tell us about the bike frame.
Love
that's
the
out
bike
there.
frame, man. Love that thing. It's one thing I grew up doing. I was like, BMX bike riding, and bike riding has always been a part of my life. As a kid, it was just like, obviously as a kid, you're riding bikes, right?
Yeah.
And we lived out in the country, and so it was like riding into the town was huge. Then also it was like an escape, like I'm basically escaping what's going on at home and just taking a ride. And then it became, through all the legal troubles, transportation. You know what I mean? Like that's how I got way back into biking and was like, oh, I can't drive for like the next 5 years. Cool, maybe I'm a biker, and into that. And I moved to Seattle and I was like, cool, the messenger world. I'm into that, and then fixed gear right. It's always been there with me, but that it just like one day occurred to me like that was also something I was chasing, So I started making these, bike frames, and I love to get into it, to shut the world out for a little bit and get into the fabrication studio and just get the TIG welder out and start working on stuff. And that was when I was like, I'm going to make this bike. This is like the bike that is me growing up and all this kind of stuff. And then it kind of became a symbol of like this, it was done. And I'm like, And so I just cut the front off.
Yeah.
Like decapitated it, and I was like, oh, that's tight, and with the chain and everything. And the curator there, Ben Haywood, man, he's like pivotal. He's awesome because he came through and he kind of understood all these things. He was like, hey, let's get the funding. Let's put these big sculptures up. Let's do this thing. Like he saw that vision. He got behind that. That was so cool. And he also was like, the bike, I want to show it outside. I want to lock it up. Let's just leave it there. I'm like, yes, dude, thank you. Like you get it. Like it's not identified as art.
Yeah, it isn't
Something
identified as art.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to comment on is that, she takes me out there and she's like, okay, this is his piece. And I'm looking at it and I'm watching people walk by it.
Right.
And it looks like basically someone
just garbage.
Chained their bike up there and someone stole the tires.
Stripped it down.
And stripped it down.
Totally.
And so that dynamic where people don't, right out of the gate know that it's art, that it sounds like to you that is cool.
Oh, it's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate because what it does is it does so much stuff. But like what I love about that is it just strips away. We all know that even if we love our jobs, everybody hates just the professionalization of everything. This whole world is so professionalized, and and it has to be on some level. There has to be a job description in order to have a performance review and to be able to, has to be all articulated. It does,
yeah.
But the art world is the worst version of it because like if you were really, really into what I think art means, then you would have already been passed into nirvana and beyond. You know, like there's no reason that you have to make it and then go show it and then have someone tell you that they're into it, or engage in a discussion that is like dynamic because they're not into it, and then have it be this think piece and then have it be all this other shit that gets attached to it. Like it's just so annoying. I'm sorry, it is, you know? And so to have something just be something and just be somewhere, it's real, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to be attached to a museum. That could have been anywhere. And I just think that that's cool that you just kind of come up on something, you don't photograph it, you don't tell anybody, it just happened, you were there, it was there, something happened, you move on.
Yeah. And the pieces that are, the source code, which is the sculpture outside, and the screens, the screens in the lobby.
Yeah.
Those pieces, are they permanent, or how long are they going to be there?
Well, actually, I'm taking the source code down next week or the week after on the 22nd. And that has been there for almost a year. So that's cool. Totally into that. There's another one of those towers in Wyoming that my friends commissioned there, or the university commissioned, I should say. But that is there, and this source code comes down. And so but that's been there for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So totally, that thing's awesome. Super psyched on that one. I love that piece. You know, it's a hate jammer. That's the whole purpose of it. It's a huge, it's a telecom tower that we made from scratch with Lars Borgeson. I always work with Lars as a fabricator. He's amazing. Okay. But yeah, made that from scratch. It emulates a telecom tower. But the symbols on it, are actually, symbols that I have as my wife and I both have these now, as these tattoos.
For the listeners, he's showing his forearm here with some symbols.
And you have the squares at the bottom, the three squares, that's, it's like the base of the pillar, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the energy that can come out of that if you sort of find this focal point, right? A personal or spiritual or mental focal point. And then it's all related, but the energy comes out of that. That's the lines coming up, which, forms the triangle if it meets other energy, which is the strongest shape, and, the unity of that. And if you find that, then, right, that leads to the beyond, which are these circles. Like that's this idea, which I did draw this by watching Fletch one day. Okay, so
Chevy Chase.
Yeah, Chevy Chase. Love. Yeah. I get such crap from this with my family. They're like, how many times have you seen Terminator? I'm like, I don't know, 300 times probably. Like Mad Max. I just watch these old movies over and over, and I'll just, because I zone out, I'll just draw or like whatever, and just watch them Fletch and drew those, and put it away, and then I was like, something's in that, and so to be on that tower, it's also, each one of those is actually 5 layers. The circles are 5, not 3, because it's the 5 elements. It's helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon. So it's the elements, and then it's glass, clear glass. So at night they glow their particular colors. Those gases all glow their own certain color. So there's no filler. It's all just like the elements, the glass. It's on this tower. It's in this formation, and it just broadcasts positivity.
Yeah,
that's the whole purpose.
So you mentioned you like film and music. What are you watching these days, and what are you listening to?
I'll start with what I'm listening to, because everyone's just like, "What is up with you, man?" I'm actually listening to a ton of Grateful Dead.
Oh, nice.
I'm like way into it, and that is like super left field for me. Yeah. My son's named Bowie, so I'm a huge Bowie fan, of course, and I love noise, like groups like Black Dice. That's like the early kind of like 2000s. I love ambient of all forms, Tim Hecker. But lately I've been listening to. We just had Amy Winehouse on last night, on the turntable. But Grateful Dead, a lot of Grateful Dead, and a lot of like live Europe '72 albums, but also just American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. I love those. I love studio albums like that, where you just can kind of hear how they construct things, and like how it comes together. And
did you ever get to see the Dead?
No, never did, and hate jam music and hate that whole world and all that stuff. So hate it. It's just like we just started going out to Orcas Island recently and kind of like taking breaks. My wife's an artist and she works a lot, so we're like trying to get better at vacations. But just went out there, and I don't know, man. I've always liked American Beauty just because it's like a classic.
That is a classic.
Classic album, and I love that idea of a classic album. So
Box of Rain.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Friend of the Devil. I mean, all that stuff. It's just like, man, that's so good. So anyway, just listening to that a lot lately, and then watching. I'm real bad because I hate TV shows. I hate them. I hate the episodes. Drives me insane. I'd rather read a book. But movie-wise, I think this is terrible. The last movie that we saw that I just actually thought was hilarious were these like series of these John Travolta movies on Netflix.
Okay.
And they're so bad. Like it's insane how bad they are.
There's a lot of bad John Travolta movies.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
These current ones, it's like when Nicolas Cage needed a lot of money. He made all these terrible like Indonesian produced movies that are just like, let's just get them done.
Well, and then there's Face Off with John Travolta
Which
and
is
Nicolas
like
Cage,
the
right?
combo is, it's like, whoa, man, this exists, and so that's on like a super guilty pleasure level. But I've actually the one that resonates most closely that I keep thinking about that I've seen lately is two things. Well, one thing that I watched recently again, it was The Master. I watched that a couple times over and over. P.T. Anderson's The Master, Joaquin Phoenix, Summer Hoffman.
Yep. The Scientology movie, right?
Yeah, just the performances there. And then what we're most excited about coming out is Lighthouse, The Lighthouse, with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson.
I have not heard about that one.
It's the guy who made the movie The Witch, and so it's like really kind of it's the movie as a weird format. It's kind of like a weird square format, like an old kind of like early 1900s kind of format. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a weird sepia black and white, and it's kind of like really tense telling in kind of colloquial English at this like lighthouse in like the probably late 1800s, early 1900s. That looks really killer. And then on books, I mean, I'm just voracious. Just read a ton. I'm reading a book about an architecture group called Elemental, like South America, and they do like really cool projects. And then Rachel Cusk wrote this series of books that's pretty cool. I guess the one I'm reading right now is Outline. I think that's the first one. That's pretty cool. A book of poetry about the Japanese internment camps. That my wife is half Japanese, and so we're going to an event called Densho in November, which is a group that acknowledges and communicates the experiences of Japanese Americans who are in the internment camps on the West Coast, which no one ever talks about.
Yeah.
In fact, I found out that the only Japanese American museum in the world is in Seattle at the Wing Luke.
What?
That's it. That's the one.
Oh my gosh.
That is the one. So it just never gets talked about. And I found this book of poetry about it that, again, I was in the bookstore at LA Bay, and I could walk up to the shelf, and I'm looking at this imprint called Song Cave, and I'm like, well, that looks like a cool one. And I'm like, oh my God, this is about crazy. Like, I'm going to go this November. And, so it was just cool to know more about that history and talk about my wife and her mom and stuff. And
yeah. Well, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
I've been experimenting with having a set of, I don't have stock questions in my interviews, but my editors told me maybe have a couple of stock questions.
We got to know something.
Yeah. Imagine you're standing in front of a room full of people, just starting out in your field, hungry to succeed. What are the two pieces of advice you would give them? One piece of mindset advice and one piece of tactical advice.
Well, I think on a mindset advice, I would say that, really the only time you ever start at the top is when you're digging a hole. I mean, I believe in that. That's something that's really important to kind of know. And it took me a long time to understand that, because you got to get in and you got to get on it. You don't know where you're going. And that's always the part that I think stumbles people up. I mean, it still stumbles me up. I get into a project and I'm just kind of like, oh my God, how are we going to get there? Like, what are we going to, how are we going to do this thing? And it's only through, I think when I was younger, it was cockiness. And I think that now it's hopefully more from the confidence that I'm just going to keep going, and, something's going to work out, but it's going to change. That idea in the beginning is like, hey, I'm going to build a mountain that's going to be mine, but it's because you dig in the ground to get that dirt out to do that. But when you start digging, there's things in there that you never knew were going to be in there, and they're going to change everything. Yeah. That's just how it is. And I think on a tactical thing, for me, it's always been this one thing that was kind of taught to me by this kind of redneck magician that I grew up with named Keith Toll. The funniest guy I ever met, but the most kind of oddly spiritual and he's a redneck magician. He could do anything, And I have many stories about Keith, but his whole thing was TTM. TTM. What's TTM? It's timing, technique, and maintenance. It's I have the timing, I'm good, and the technique for sure, and the maintenance to kind of keep that tight. And then when things shift, it's maintenance and timing are off, so the technique hopefully can pick up, right? Yeah. But it's kind of like a triangle, So I think it keeps you present. I think it keeps you honest. I think that's been the most powerful thing for me as a creative person.
Yeah. Which piece of work are you most proud of, and why?
I think I hate to kind of go with the trope that it's like, like I think an artist is always super psyched on the newest thing that they've made. And because obviously, I mean, I can definitely pick out some kernels throughout all the shit that I've made. I mean, I think most of all, it would, if you asked me a year ago, it definitely would have been Metanoia, because it was the most challenging thing, and it made some relationships and it broke some relationships along the way. So I think that's been the most formative piece, I would say. Favorite piece would definitely be All My Friends up at the Museum of Museums.
Yeah.
It feels like a real big victory lap, a nice culmination of saying, hey, I don't want to do anything this year, because I'm just kind of like, what would I do? What would I say? I have nothing left to say. I've said it all, like I really have. Or at this point in time, So that's like a victory lap. That's like so cool. It happened so fast, and it just is like what it's supposed to be, and it's not perfect. There's like tons of little like, oh my God, I would never have done that. But like, fuck it, it's awesome. You know, and everyone's stoked on it. And, saw someone last night. I mean, literally, man, I'll be somewhere and someone will yell out the window, Dylan, I saw Mom, I love it. I'm like, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, awesome, and this guy's like, man, it's like Anchor in the Neighborhood. And I'm like, well, that's cool.
That's great.
That feels good. Like, and it was just, again, not a fluke, but it just came together.
Yeah.
So
well,
cool.
When you look around, it is such a dark area of town, and to light it up, to literally light up a neighborhood like that must feel
even during
cool.
the day.
Yeah.
Like, it's even during the day you can see it, which is like, wow, that's crazy. So yeah, that's cool.
So where can people find you online, social media, and otherwise?
I've really peeled back the website now is still DylanNeuwirth.com, but it's just like one page.
I saw
and
that.
There's a contact, and there's like this, like, I was born in this year and I'm going to die in this year. I'll be 77 years old. I was born in 1977. I hope I lived to 77 years old. That's a great age.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that's that. And then here's my social media. And the only thing I have, it really is, I've always had a fun, strong Facebook presence, because it's always been a big community there. And then of course Instagram, has always been fun. And then I've got one little, I started writing a novel that I've been working on for like 20 years, and I've got like half a page up on Medium. Haven't added back to it yet. It's still in progress. That's one thing I've like, it's on the horizon here constantly. And then that one video. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what's up there. I feel that's like, hey, this is what I do.
Now that video can be found at the BAM site. Is that right?
It's on BAM's site, and it's on Vimeo. Yeah.
Okay.
And, to be honest, I've had people, I've so enjoyed speaking with you today. I've had people reach out for interviews, and I just send them the video.
Yeah.
Like, here you go.
Yeah. It says a lot.
What else do you need? It's all here,
Right.
So,
well, Dylan Neuwirth, thank you so much for talking
my pleasure.
with us.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Dreampath podcast. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to your favorite podcast service and give me a rating and review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. I appreciate your time, and as always, go find your dream path.